My name is Scott, and if you'd asked me a year ago what the dumbest decision I'd ever make would be, I probably would have said dropping out of college for a semester to help my dad keep our family hardware store alive. I would have been wrong. The dumbest decision was taking a summer job working for Parker's family. The worst part? I knew exactly who Parker was before I ever filled out the application. Our town wasn't huge. About 20,000 people, one main street, one high school, one grocery store everyone complained about but kept shopping at anyway. If someone sneezed on one side of town, people on the other side somehow knew about it before lunch. Everyone knew the Bennett family. They owned Bennett Orchards, the biggest apple orchard and farm market in the county. They hosted fall festivals, weddings, hayrides, school trips. Basically every family memory within 50 miles somehow involved their property. They also happened to be rich. Not celebrity rich. Small town rich. The kind where your last name opens doors before you even knock. And Parker Bennett was their oldest son. 24 years old. Tall. Confident. Always looked like he'd stepped out of some outdoor clothing catalog without trying. I'd had a crush on him since I was 19. Not because we'd ever talked. Actually, we'd barely exchanged 10 words. My crush was built almost entirely from watching him exist. Sometimes he'd stop by our hardware store with one of the orchard managers to pick up supplies. Sometimes I'd see him coaching Little League baseball. Sometimes we'd end up at the same coffee shop on Saturday mornings. Every single time, I'd suddenly become fascinated with whatever shelf happened to be closest. Because looking at him for more than 2 seconds felt dangerous. Not because he was intimidating. Because he smiled at everyone. Cashiers. Kids. Old couples. Stray dogs. He had this annoyingly genuine way of making whoever he was talking to feel like they were the only person in the room. Which meant I'd spent 3 years inventing conversations we never had. Pathetic. I know. Life was already complicated enough before Bennett Orchards posted a hiring notice. Seasonal help needed. Property maintenance. Guest services. Event staff. Competitive pay. I ignored it. Twice. Then Dad called me into the back office of the store. You've seen the numbers. I nodded. Business had been rough for months. Big chain stores. Online shopping. Everything people needed, they could order cheaper somewhere else. We'll be okay. I lied. Dad smiled sadly. I appreciate the optimism. I can work more hours. You already are. He leaned back in his chair. Scott. Whenever parents start a sentence with your name like that, it's never good. I need you to think about yourself too. I'm fine. No. He folded his hands. You're 23. I know how old I am. You've been putting your life on hold because you think you have to save this place. I looked around the tiny office. The faded baseball calendar. The old coffee maker that probably belonged in a museum. The family photos taped to the filing cabinet. My grandfather opening the store. Dad as a teenager stocking shelves. Me at 12 pretending to operate the register. This place matters. It does. So I stay. He sighed. I don't want you staying because you feel guilty. I don't. That was only half true. 3 days later, my best friend Evan walked into the store carrying 2 iced coffees. You look miserable. I am. Excellent. He handed me one. Drink. You came all the way here just to insult me? I came because your dad told my mom you're refusing to apply for better jobs. I narrowed my eyes. Our parents gossip too much. They're friends. They're dangerous. He laughed. So what? Bennett Orchards. I pretended not to hear him. The application. I know there's an application. Did you fill it out? No. Why? I started organizing paintbrushes that didn't need organizing. I'm busy. Scott. I'm working. Scott. What? He leaned across the counter. Is this because Parker works there? I almost dropped the entire display. No. That wasn't convincing. It has nothing to do with Parker. You turned bright red. I did not. You absolutely did. I hated that he was smiling. You've had a ridiculous crush on that guy forever. I do not. You once spent 20 minutes choosing a hammer because he walked into the store. That never happened. It absolutely happened. I was comparing brands. You were holding the same hammer upside down. I covered my face. Can we never talk about this again? No. He looked entirely too pleased with himself. Because here's the thing. I don't want to hear the thing. You're never going to magically stop liking him by avoiding places he exists. I'm not avoiding him. You literally cross the street if you see him coming. That's unrelated. Evan stared at me. So unrelated. I sighed. It doesn't matter. Why not? He doesn't know I exist. That's fixable. No. Talking usually helps. I can't just walk up to someone I've secretly liked for 3 years. Sure you can. I absolutely cannot. He took a long sip of his coffee. So instead you'll stay broke. That's dramatic. Is it? Unfortunately. No. It wasn't. That night I filled out the application. Not because of Parker. That's what I kept telling myself. It was the pay. The schedule. The fact that seasonal work might help Dad enough that I wouldn't feel completely useless. Parker had nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing. I got a call 2 days later. Scott? This is Scott. Hi, this is Linda from Bennett Orchards. My stomach immediately tied itself into complicated knots. We'd love to bring you in for an interview. Really? If you're still interested. Yeah. I cleared my throat. I mean, yes. Absolutely. She laughed softly. Tomorrow at 10? I'll be there. The moment I hung up, regret hit me. What was I thinking? There had to be hundreds of other jobs. Anywhere else. Literally anywhere. But the interview was already scheduled. Backing out would be embarrassing. Showing up might somehow be even worse. The next morning I drove to Bennett Orchards 20 minutes early. Mostly because I was nervous. Partly because I got lost twice despite living here almost my entire life. The property was enormous. Rows of apple trees stretched across rolling hills. The farm market sat near the entrance, surrounded by flower beds that somehow looked perfect despite being completely real. Workers drove small utility vehicles between buildings. Families wandered around with coffee and pastries. Even on a weekday morning, the place felt alive. I parked, took one deep breath, then another. You've got this. I did not have this. Inside the main office, a woman smiled at me. You must be Scott. That's me. I'm Linda. She shook my hand. Interview should only take about 15 minutes. Perfect. Short. Professional. No Parker. See? Everything was. Morning, Linda. I froze. I knew that voice. Not because I'd talked to him. Because apparently my brain had memorized it. I turned around. Parker Bennett stood in the doorway carrying a clipboard. Work boots. Faded jeans. Dark green flannel with the sleeves rolled up. Hair slightly messy like he'd already been outside for hours. He looked over. Our eyes met. And then. He smiled. Hey. Just. Hey. Simple. Friendly. Like he smiled at everyone. Hi. I managed. Great. One whole syllable. Outstanding work, Scott. Linda looked between us. You two know each other? Before I could answer, Parker said. I've seen him around town. Then he looked back at me. Hardware store, right? I blinked. You remember that? Sure. He shrugged. You always helped me find what I needed. My brain completely stopped functioning. He remembered me? Not only remembered me. Remembered where I worked. I stared at him like an idiot. He smiled again. I've got to get back outside. Then to Linda. See you later. Have fun. He left. The office suddenly felt suspiciously warmer. Linda laughed. You okay? Yeah. No offense. None taken. But you looked like someone unplugged your brain. I looked toward the door Parker had disappeared through. I think that's exactly what happened. Interview forgotten. Heart racing. Because somehow, the guy I'd convinced myself had no idea I existed. Had known exactly who I was all along. I spent the next 10 minutes answering Linda's questions on complete autopilot. Previous work experience? Hardware store for almost 8 years. Comfortable working outdoors? Yes. Can you lift 50 pounds? I think so. Available weekends? Absolutely. Meanwhile, my brain was still stuck on one sentence. Hardware store, right? He remembered me. Not just my face. Where I worked. Which made absolutely no sense. I barely spoke whenever he came in. If anything, I'd actively tried to become invisible. So, Linda said, setting my application aside, most of our seasonal employees rotate through different departments. Okay. You'll probably spend time doing maintenance, helping with events, moving supplies, whatever needs doing. Sounds good. She smiled. I think you'll fit in well here. I hoped she was right. Because if Parker worked here every day, this summer was going to test my sanity. Dad was grinning before I even got home. You got it? How did you know? Linda called. Already? We've known the Bennetts for years. Of course they had. Small town. Everyone knew everyone. They said you start Monday. I nodded. Dad looked relieved. Actually relieved. Like a weight had finally been lifted off his shoulders. That feeling alone made accepting the job worth it. Even if it meant seeing Parker almost every day. Monday arrived way too quickly. I showed up 15 minutes early. Again. Mostly because I wanted to seem responsible. Definitely not because arriving late on my first day while Parker was somewhere on the property would have been my personal nightmare. A dozen other seasonal employees gathered near the equipment shed. College students. A few people around my age. Some older workers returning for another season. Everyone chatted like they'd known each other forever. I stood awkwardly near the coffee station pretending to examine a map of the orchard. First day? I looked up. A blonde woman around 26 smiled at me. That obvious? You've read that map 3 times upside down. I have. You have. She laughed. I'm Mia. Scott. Relax. She grabbed a coffee. Everyone's nervous the first day. I'll survive. Probably. Before I could answer, someone clapped loudly. Morning, everyone! I looked toward the voice. Parker. Standing on the back of a small trailer. Clipboard in one hand. Coffee in the other. Sunlight behind him. Great. Now he looked even more unfairly attractive. Welcome to Bennett Orchards. He smiled at the group. If this is your first season, we're glad you're here. His voice carried easily. Comfortable. Confident. Not rehearsed. We work hard. He paused. We also try not to make work miserable. A few people laughed. If you've got questions, ask. If something's broken, tell someone. If you don't know how to do something. He grinned. Please don't guess. More laughter. I found myself smiling too. This week's mostly training. You'll all rotate between departments. He looked down at his clipboard. Let's split into teams. Names started being called. People drifted toward different supervisors. Then, Scott. I raised my hand. Parker looked up. There you are. He checked something on the clipboard. You're with me. Of course I was. Naturally. The universe clearly hated me. There were 6 of us in Parker's group. Mia. A college football player named Tyler. 2 sisters home for the summer. An older guy named Ron. And me. Parker led us toward one of the storage barns. We'll spend today getting familiar with the property. He unlocked the doors. Inside sat tractors, utility vehicles, ladders, tools, stacks of fencing, gardening supplies. Everything organized with military precision. First rule. He pointed toward the wall. If you borrow something. He waited. Mia raised a hand dramatically. Put it back? Exactly. He smiled. I already like you. She bowed dramatically. I aim to please. Everyone laughed. Even Parker. It was strange watching him interact with people. Easy. Natural. He somehow remembered everyone's names almost immediately. Made jokes without trying too hard. Actually listened when people spoke. None of it felt fake. Which somehow made my crush even worse. By lunch, we'd already repaired fencing, unloaded deliveries, and learned how not to crash the utility carts. Apparently that last lesson existed because someone crashed one every summer. Not naming names, Parker said. Tyler pointed at Mia. It was definitely her. I've been here 4 hours. So? She threw an apple at him. Parker caught it before it hit Tyler. See? He held up the apple. This is why we can't have nice things. Everyone laughed again. I noticed something. Whenever Parker laughed, he looked younger. Less like the guy everyone in town admired. More like just a normal person. Lunch happened outside beneath a row of maple trees. Long picnic tables. Packed lunches. Employees scattered everywhere. I quietly opened the sandwich I'd brought from home. You always this quiet? I looked up. Parker sat across from me. My heartbeat immediately became unhelpful. Brilliant start. I'm usually quieter around new people. Fair. He opened a bottle of water. How's the first day treating you? Good. Too much? No. I smiled. Actually, better than I expected. I'm glad. There was a comfortable silence. Then, I've been meaning to ask. Oh no. What? How's your dad doing? I blinked. You know my dad? Of course. He looked surprised. Your family owns Harris Hardware. Yeah. My dad's been buying supplies there since before I was born. Right. Obviously. They've known each other forever. I suddenly felt ridiculous. I'd spent years assuming Parker barely knew I existed. Meanwhile, he knew my family. My job. Probably my last name. We've missed seeing him as much lately. I nodded. He's been working less. Everything okay? There was genuine concern in his voice. Not politeness. Concern. The store's been struggling. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry. It'll be okay. I hope so. Then he smiled. For what it's worth. Yeah? Your dad always says you're the reason that place still runs. I stared at him. He said that? Last time I saw him. My chest tightened. Dad had never said anything like that to me. I think he was pretty proud. I looked down at my sandwich because suddenly my eyes stung a little. Parker pretended not to notice. Instead, he started talking about the orchard. About which apple varieties ripened first. About how every season something unexpected always happened. By the end of lunch, I'd actually relaxed. Just a little. The rest of the afternoon flew by. Until the latter incident. Scott. Parker pointed toward one of the storage shelves. Mind grabbing that box? Sure. Simple enough. I climbed halfway up the ladder. Reached for the box. And immediately realized it weighed far more than expected. Oh. It shifted. So did I. The ladder wobbled. Whoa. Before I could react, Parker was already there. Steadying the ladder with both hands. Easy. I'm good. I know. His voice stayed calm. No rush. I carefully climbed down carrying the box. Once my feet hit the ground, I exhaled. Thanks. No problem. He looked at the label. I probably should have warned you that one weighs about 40 pounds. That would have helped. My mistake. He smiled. I'll blame Monday. Deal. Mia walked by carrying gardening tools. I give him 5 more minutes before he almost falls again. I heard that. I called. Good. She grinned. Stay on the ground. When the workday finally ended, everyone slowly headed toward the parking area. I climbed into my truck completely exhausted. Someone knocked lightly on the window. Parker. I rolled it down. Hey. Hey. You heading straight home? Yeah. He nodded. Tell your dad I said hi? I will. And Scott? Yeah? I'm glad you applied. For 1 second, I completely forgot how words worked. Thanks. He smiled one last time, then walked toward his own truck. I sat there watching him leave. Only after he'd driven away did I realize something. This was supposed to make my crush disappear. Actually getting to know him. Seeing the real person instead of the version I'd invented. Instead, it was becoming so much worse. Because the real Parker Bennett was somehow even kinder than the one I'd imagined. By the end of my second week, I'd learned 3 things. First, orchard work was far more exhausting than it looked. Second, Mia somehow had enough energy to talk for 12 straight hours without repeating herself. And third, working beside your longtime crush every day was an excellent way to lose your mind. Not because Parker flirted. He didn't. Not with me. Not with anyone. He was simply Parker. Friendly. Patient. The same with everyone. Which should have made it easier. Instead, it made him impossible not to like. Wednesday morning started before sunrise. We had an event scheduled that weekend, and preparations were already underway. Rows of tents needed assembling. Signs needed repainting. Tables moved. Decorations unpacked. By 7:30 everyone already looked awake. Except me. You look terrible. I accepted the coffee Mia handed me. Thank you? It wasn't a compliment. I know. You look like you slept in a tree. I stayed up watching videos. Why? I couldn't sleep. She narrowed her eyes. Thinking about someone? I nearly inhaled my coffee. No. Scott. No. You're a terrible liar. Before I could answer, Parker walked over carrying 2 clipboards. Morning. Mia smiled. Morning, boss. I'm not your boss. You keep saying that. I'm your supervisor. Sounds like a boss. He laughed. I've already lost this argument. Then he looked at me. You awake? Barely. He pointed toward the coffee. Good. I'm going to need you functioning today. I'll do my best. I believe you. Just 3 words. I believe you. For some reason. They stayed with me all morning. Around 10 o'clock we started replacing decorative fencing near the entrance. It wasn't difficult work. Just repetitive. Which meant conversation happened naturally. Tyler looked over at Parker. So? How long have you worked here? Parker laughed. My whole life. Seriously? I was helping clean the market before I was old enough to reach the shelves. What about college? Went. Came back. Tyler nodded. You always planned to? Parker looked across the orchard. I wasn't sure. What changed? My parents are getting older. He shrugged. This place means a lot to our family. Something about the way he said it reminded me of Dad talking about the hardware store. Not obligation. Love. I figured. He smiled slightly. If I was going to work this hard, I might as well build something that already feels like home. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Mia pointed at me. See? What? You've got that exact face. What face? The one that says you're thinking way too hard? I'm working. You're absolutely not. Parker chuckled. I think she's right. Great. Now both of them were reading my expressions. Later that afternoon I was helping unload lumber near one of the barns when I heard someone call Parker's name. I glanced over. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, came running across the grass. Parker! He immediately knelt down. Hey, Emma. She practically launched herself into a hug. My dad said you fixed the swing. I did. Can we go see? As soon as your dad says it's okay. She nodded excitedly before racing back toward her family. I watched the entire exchange. Parker stood back up smiling. You've got fans. He looked over. Oh. He laughed. Emma's family comes every year. She seems to like you. She's mostly excited because I let her name the farm cats. How many cats are there? Too many. What are their names? He rubbed the back of his neck. You don't want to know. I absolutely do. He sighed dramatically. Captain Pancake. I blinked. Princess Potato. I started laughing. Sir Wiggles. By now I couldn't breathe. And he looked genuinely embarrassed. Jeff. I wiped tears from my eyes. Jeff? I didn't name Jeff. You named Captain Pancake. I was outvoted. You own the orchard. I still got outvoted. That conversation somehow became my favorite moment of the week. Because for the first time, I saw Parker embarrassed. And it was incredibly human. Friday afternoon changed everything. Not dramatically. Just enough. We were reorganizing equipment inside one of the older barns when a summer storm rolled in. Rain hammered the metal roof. Thunder echoed through the building. Power flickered once. Then went out completely. Perfect timing, Ron muttered. Parker grabbed a flashlight. We'll wait it out. The rain became even heavier. Nobody was leaving anytime soon. Tyler and Ron kept working by the open doorway. Mia wandered off looking for snacks, leaving me standing beside Parker in the middle of a dimly lit barn. Fantastic. So, he leaned against a workbench. You settling in okay? Yeah. I'm glad. It's actually. I looked around. A really good place to work. That's nice to hear. He smiled. We try. There was another clap of thunder. You afraid of storms? He asked. No. You looked up pretty fast. I was checking the roof. Sure you were. I laughed. Fine. They're loud. I get that. Another comfortable silence. Then Parker looked at me thoughtfully. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really apply here? My heart skipped. Because I had two answers. The true one. And the useful one. The hardware store. He nodded. I figured. Dad needed help. I know. I wanted to earn enough that. I stopped. That what? I don't know. So you could breathe. I looked at him. What? He folded his arms. You've been carrying something around since your first day. I haven't. You have. He smiled gently. You always look relaxed. He pointed toward the orchard. Until someone mentions your family. I stared at the floor. I guess I'm not hiding it very well. You don't have to. That sentence landed harder than he probably realized. You know, he continued quietly. My dad used to carry everything by himself. What changed? My mom finally convinced him that letting people help wasn't weakness. He smiled to himself. Took about 15 years. I laughed softly. Sounds stubborn. He absolutely is. So are you. I looked up. What? You remind me of him. I've known you for 2 weeks. Long enough. He shrugged. You work like everything depends on you. Sometimes it does. No. His voice stayed calm. It feels like it does. That was different. Important somehow. Before I could answer, the lights suddenly came back on. The moment disappeared. Someone shouted from outside. We're good. The storm had passed. Work resumed. Conversation over. Yet somehow, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Saturday was chaos. The summer festival opened. Thousands of visitors poured into the orchard. Families. Tourists. children running everywhere. Every employee stayed busy from opening until closing. I barely saw Parker all day. Whenever I did, he was solving another problem. Helping vendors. Directing traffic. Fixing equipment. Talking to guests. He never seemed overwhelmed. Just present. Late that afternoon, I finally got 5 minutes to breathe behind the cider stand. Someone handed me a cold bottle of water. I turned. Parker. You look like you're about to collapse. I might. You've been working nonstop. So have you? He smiled. I own slightly more responsibility. I don't think ownership counts as exercise. It definitely should. I laughed. He leaned against the fence. You've been doing great. Really? Absolutely. I thought I messed up the parking situation. You did. Thanks. But then you fixed it. I got lucky. You asked for help. He shrugged. That's not luck. Before I could answer. Park! A deep voice called from behind us. I turned. A man around Parker's age walked over carrying a stack of folded chairs. Broad shoulders. Dark hair. Easy confidence. He dropped the chairs beside us. There you are. Parker smiled. Scott, this is my younger brother Mason. Younger? Mason rolled his eyes. By 18 months. We're still counting. Parker looked at me. Mason basically runs half the event side of things. I basically fix whatever he forgets. That's rude. It's accurate. The brothers immediately started teasing each other. Comfortable. Automatic. Like they'd been having the same conversation for years. Then Mason looked at me. So you're Scott. I froze. Yeah. He smiled. I've heard good things. I looked at Parker. Parker looked mildly embarrassed. Mason. What? You have. I do. Mason shrugged. He keeps saying you're one of the hardest workers they've hired. Silence. Complete silence. Parker rubbed the back of his neck. I might have mentioned that. Mason grinned. I'll leave before he fires me. You don't even work for me. Exactly. He walked away laughing. I slowly turned back toward Parker. You've been talking about me? He looked genuinely uncomfortable for the first time. A little. Why? Because. He smiled awkwardly. It's nice having someone around who actually cares. For 1 second. Everything else disappeared. The noise. The festival. The crowds. Because Parker Bennett, the guy I'd secretly admired for years, had noticed me. Not because of my crush. Not because of luck. Because of who I was. And somehow, that realization was even more dangerous than the crush itself. The rest of Saturday should have been easy. Instead, every time I saw Parker, one thought kept repeating in my head. He'd been talking about me. Not in some dramatic way. Not constantly. Just enough that his brother knew my name. It shouldn't have mattered. It absolutely mattered. By closing time, everyone looked exhausted. The last visitors finally headed toward the parking lot. Employees began folding tables, stacking chairs, hauling decorations back into storage. Mia dropped into a chair beside me. I can't feel my legs. I don't think I can feel anything. Tomorrow? I might still be asleep. She laughed. You survived your first festival. Barely. You did better than Tyler. I looked over. Tyler was trying to untangle a string of lights that somehow wrapped around his own backpack. Impressive. He's talented. Across the courtyard, Parker was helping 2 older employees load equipment into a trailer. Even after 12 hours of work, he was still smiling. I honestly didn't understand how. An hour later, only a handful of us remained. The sky had already turned orange. Most of the orchard sat quiet again. Parker clapped his hands once. That's enough. Ron looked up. We've still got the storage shed. It'll still be there tomorrow. Nobody argued. We were all too tired. Go home. Parker said. You earned it. Everyone scattered toward their cars. I was halfway across the parking lot when I heard footsteps behind me. Scott! I turned. Parker caught up carrying 2 paper cups. Thought you might need this. He handed me one. Hot cider. Still warm. You didn't have to. I know. He leaned against my truck. We always make extra after festivals. I took a sip. It was incredible. I think this is the best cider I've ever had. He smiled proudly. My grandfather would appreciate hearing that. You've been making it that long? Longer. He looked toward the processing building. Same recipe. There was something peaceful about the empty orchard. No crowds. No music. Just crickets beginning to chirp somewhere beyond the trees. You ever get tired of this place? I asked. He thought for a moment. Sometimes. Really? Mostly during festival season. He laughed quietly. But then everyone leaves. He looked around. And I remember why I love it. I followed his gaze. Rows of apple trees disappeared into the evening light. The breeze barely moved the branches. It really was beautiful. I guess I never noticed. Most people don't. He looked at me. You've been noticing more lately. I have. You stop rushing once you've been here a while. His voice had become quieter. That's when you start seeing the place. Something about the way he said it made me wonder if he was talking about more than the orchard. Before I could ask, his phone rang. He checked the screen. My mom. You should answer. I should. He smiled apologetically. Drive safe? You too. He answered the call while walking away. I stood there another minute before climbing into my truck. For some reason, going home suddenly felt disappointing. Sunday was technically our day off. I planned to sleep until noon. Instead, Dad knocked on my bedroom door at 8:30. Morning. I groaned into my pillow. No. He laughed. I made pancakes. I'm listening. 20 minutes later, we were eating breakfast together. Dad looked better than he had in weeks. More relaxed. So, how's the orchard? It's good. You like it? I do. He smiled into his coffee. I figured. You did? You've stopped looking worried all the time. I hadn't noticed that. I guess. You laugh more too. That surprised me. I do? You do. He pointed his fork at me. Whatever's happening over there. He shrugged. It's good for you. If only he knew. Around noon my phone buzzed. Mia. Emergency. I frowned. What happened? I locked my keys inside the equipment shed. How is that an emergency? Because Parker has the spare key and he's already here. I stared at the message. She couldn't be serious. So? Come help me. Why? Because I refused to suffer alone. 20 minutes later, I found myself driving back to the orchard. I hated that she knew exactly how to manipulate me. The place looked completely different without visitors. Quiet. Almost peaceful. I spotted Mia sitting on the steps outside the maintenance building. You actually came. You threatened me. I asked nicely. You absolutely didn't. She stood. Come on. As we rounded the corner. There she is. Parker stood beside the shed holding a keyring. He looked from Mia to me. You recruited backup? I recruited emotional support. I sighed. She texted me emergency. It was. I was dying. You were mildly inconvenienced. Details. Parker laughed. You two argue like siblings. Mia gasped dramatically. That's offensive. I'll survive. He unlocked the shed. There. Problem solved. Mia immediately grabbed her keys from a workbench. I can never tell anyone this happened. I already planned to. She pointed at Parker. Traitor. He raised both hands. I made no promises. She groaned loudly before heading toward the parking lot. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And just like that, she left, leaving me alone with Parker. Again. Neither of us moved right away. He locked the shed. I appreciate you rescuing her. I think she tricked me. Probably. He slipped the keys back onto his belt. Want to walk? I blinked. What? I need to check irrigation lines. He pointed toward the orchard. It's about 20 minutes. Oh. My brain scrambled. Sure. We started down one of the dirt paths between endless rows of apple trees. Without crowds. The orchard felt completely different. Birds chirped overhead. Wind moved softly through the leaves. Some apples had already started changing color. You've never really walked through here, have you? I looked around. No. I thought so. He slowed his pace. Most visitors stay near the market. This goes on forever. Almost. He smiled. About 300 acres. I whistled quietly. I can't even imagine taking care of all this. You don't. You build a team. There was that word again. Team. Not employees. Not workers. Team. It fit him. You know, he said after a minute. I've been meaning to ask something. I glanced over. Okay. What did you want to do? What do you mean? Before the hardware store. The question caught me off guard. I honestly didn't know. I studied business. Planning to take over the store? I thought so. And now? I shrugged. I don't know anymore. He nodded like he understood. That's a weird place to be. You. He smiled. I wanted to be a wildlife photographer. I stopped walking. What? I know. He laughed. Doesn't exactly match this. I never would have guessed. I was obsessed. What happened? He looked across the orchard. Life. My grandfather got sick. My parents needed help. I came home for one summer. He smiled to himself. Then another. And another. And suddenly 10 years had gone by. There wasn't bitterness in his voice. Just honesty. Do you regret it? He thought for a long time. Sometimes. Then he smiled. But only for a few minutes. We kept walking. I still take pictures. He pulled out his phone. Want to see? He opened an album. I expected orchard photos. Instead, foxes, owls, deer, sunrises, storm clouds, birds landing on old fences. Every picture was incredible. You took these? Yeah. They're amazing. He looked embarrassed. They're okay. No. I handed the phone back. They're really amazing. For a second, he looked genuinely happy. Not because I complimented him. Because I meant it. I've never shown those to anyone from work. Why? He shrugged. They usually expect farm pictures. I like these better. So do I. On the walk back, we talked about everything except work. Favorite movies. Terrible music from middle school. The worst jobs we'd ever had. It was easy. Too easy. I'd imagined talking to Parker 1,000 times over the years. Reality felt completely different. Less perfect. Much more real. Much more dangerous. Because every minute we spent together, the imaginary version of him disappeared. And the real one, the man beside me laughing about accidentally falling into a pond when he was 16, was becoming impossible not to fall for. Again. Or maybe, for the very first time. As we reached the parking lot, Parker stopped beside my truck. I'm glad Mia locked herself out. I laughed. I don't think she's going to appreciate hearing that. Probably not. He smiled. But I got to know you a little better. My heart skipped. I like that. Before I could answer, another truck pulled into the lot. An older man climbed out. Gray hair. Broad shoulders. The kind of quiet confidence that reminded me immediately of Parker. His father. Afternoon. The man smiled warmly. You must be Scott. I nodded. Yes, sir. He walked over and offered his hand. I'm David Bennett. It's nice to meet you. I've heard a lot about you. I looked instinctively at Parker. He suddenly seemed fascinated by absolutely anything except this conversation. His father smiled. My son doesn't compliment people often. Parker sighed. Dad, I'm just telling the truth. David looked back at me. He says you work hard? You're dependable. And apparently you've convinced Mia to show up on time. I have not. Parker laughed. Nobody can do that. David smiled again before excusing himself toward the office. The moment he disappeared inside, I looked at Parker. You've really been talking about me. He rubbed the back of his neck. I guess I have. Why? He met my eyes. This time he didn't look away. Because you're hard not to notice. Either of us spoke. The afternoon breeze moved quietly through the trees behind us. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Then someone called Parker's name from across the yard. The moment broke. I should. He pointed toward the office. Yeah. I nodded. You should. He smiled one last time. See you tomorrow, Scott. Tomorrow. I watched him walk away. For the first time since taking this job, I realized something that both thrilled and terrified me. This wasn't just me secretly watching Parker anymore. Somehow, he had started noticing me too. Monday morning felt different. Nothing had actually changed. Same orchard. Same employees. Same schedule. But after walking through the apple trees with Parker the day before, I couldn't pretend he was just the guy I'd admired from a distance anymore. Now I knew things. He wanted to be a wildlife photographer. He still carried his camera everywhere. He secretly took incredible pictures and almost nobody had seen them. And somehow, he'd been telling both his family and his brother good things about me. That knowledge made it strangely difficult to act normal. Not that I'd ever been particularly good at acting normal around him. Morning. I looked up from unloading flower boxes. Parker was carrying 2 clipboards again. Morning. You look rested. I actually slept. I can tell. He smiled. You don't look like you're fighting your alarm clock. I won. Barely. Before I could answer, Mia appeared carrying 3 trays of flowers. I lost. Parker laughed. I can see that. My alarm betrayed me. You hit snooze 7 times. It was self-defense. You were 20 minutes late. I was fashionably late. You were just late. She looked offended. I expected more support from management. I'm not management. You keep saying that. He sighed dramatically. I really do. Watching the two of them argue had become one of my favorite parts of every morning. Mostly because Parker always looked happier after laughing. By mid-morning we were decorating the outdoor pavilion for a wedding scheduled later that week. White lanterns. Wooden signs. Flower arrangements. Everything had to look perfect. Tyler struggled with a ladder while Ron tried not to laugh. I've got it. No, you don't. I absolutely. The ladder leaned sideways. Ron caught it before disaster struck. You definitely don't. Everyone laughed. Even Tyler. Parker walked over shaking his head. This is exactly why I said not to rush. I wasn't rushing. You were climbing 2 steps at a time. I was being efficient. You were inventing paperwork for me. Tyler surrendered immediately. There. Parker looked around. Scott. Yeah? You mind helping me with the lanterns? Sure. Just like that. We ended up working together again. The lanterns had to be hung from heavy wooden beams inside the pavilion. One person climbed the ladder. The other handed everything up. Simple. At least in theory. You ever afraid of heights? Parker asked from halfway up the ladder. Not really. You looked nervous the first week. I was afraid of falling. Reasonable difference. I handed him another lantern. So, he said while fastening it. Your dad called mine yesterday. I nearly dropped the next lantern. He did? Apparently they're planning lunch sometime this week. I smiled. They've always gotten along. They have. He climbed down. I think my dad likes having someone who understands what it's like running a family business. My dad says your father always gives good advice. He gives everyone advice. Does he ever stop? No. We laughed together. Then Parker looked at me for a second longer than usual. You know. What? I don't think I've ever seen you without work gloves. I looked down. I guess not. Can I ask why? It's embarrassing. I promise not to laugh. You absolutely will. He leaned casually against the ladder. Try me. I slowly pulled off my right glove. A faded scar stretched across the side of my hand. When I was 16. I smiled despite myself. I thought I knew how to repair a lawnmower. Oh no. Oh yes. Lost an argument with the engine? The engine won. He studied the scar. Looks painful. It was. He looked back up. But Dad never said I told you so. What did he say? I smiled. Next time, ask for help before taking apart expensive machinery. Parker laughed. That's actually good advice. It really was. He nodded thoughtfully. I've got one too. He rolled up his sleeve just enough to reveal a thin white line near his elbow. Fence post. Really? I was showing off. Worth it? Absolutely not. For the next few minutes we compared old injuries like two 12-year-olds. It was ridiculous. And somehow, the easiest conversation we'd ever had. Around lunchtime, David Bennett drove past in one of the utility vehicles. He stopped beside us. You boys making progress? We're almost done. David looked around approvingly. Looks good. Then he glanced at me. Scott. Yes, sir? You got a minute later? My stomach immediately tightened. Of course. He smiled. Nothing bad. Then he drove away. The second he disappeared, I looked at Parker. Should I be worried? He frowned. No. You sure? My dad doesn't ask people to talk if they're in trouble. What if this is the first time? Parker laughed. I promise. You're smiling. Because you look terrified. I am. You'll be fine. Easy for him to say. An hour later I knocked on the office door. Come in. David sat behind a large wooden desk covered in maps and paperwork. He gestured toward the chair. Sit. I obeyed. For a moment he simply studied me. Not in an uncomfortable way. More like he was organizing his thoughts. Finally he smiled. How's your father? Doing better. I'm glad. He folded his hands. I wanted to thank you. I blinked. For what? My son. I stared. I'm sorry? He's happier. For several seconds I honestly thought I'd misheard him. David continued. Parker takes this place seriously. Too seriously sometimes. He works. He worries. He solves everyone else's problems. But lately, he smiled to himself. He comes home talking about funny conversations. The crew. The orchard. He shrugged. I haven't heard him laugh this much in a while. I didn't know what to say. You've been good for him. My chest tightened. I don't think I've done anything. Sometimes that's exactly the point. He leaned back. You listen. You work. You don't expect special treatment. He smiled kindly. I appreciate that. I sat there speechless. Finally I managed. Thank you? Don't thank me. He stood. Just keep being yourself. When I stepped outside, the afternoon sunshine suddenly felt brighter. Not because of what David had said. Because of who he'd said it about. Parker. Happy. Laughing more. Talking about work. Talking about us? No. Not us. Just our conversations. I needed to stop reading into everything. Immediately. Late that afternoon, the temperature climbed into the 90s. Everyone slowed down. Even Mia stopped talking for almost 3 full minutes. A new record. Parker tossed bottles of water into a cooler. Mandatory break. Nobody argued. We all collapsed beneath a large oak tree overlooking the orchard. The breeze felt incredible. Tyler stretched dramatically. "If I move," he announced, "I'm going to become one with this grass." "Please don't," Mia replied. "We just mowed." Ron chuckled. "I'll get the rake." Tyler groaned. "I hate all of you." Parker sat down beside me. Not directly next to me. Close enough that our shoulders almost touched. He handed me another bottle of water. "Thanks. You've been quiet. I've been thinking." "Dangerous." I laughed. "Probably." He took a drink before asking, "What about?" I hesitated. Could I tell him? Not the real reason. Not that his father had completely rearranged my emotional stability 20 minutes earlier. "Life." He nodded slowly. "Big topic." "I know." After a moment he said, "My mom has this saying." "Yeah?" "Most people spend so much time planning the next chapter." He looked across the rows of apple trees. "They forget they're already living one." I smiled. "She sounds wise." "She usually is." He looked back at me. "You don't always have to know where you're going." The words landed deeper than he could have known. Because for months, I'd felt completely lost. Between Dad, the store, college, money, the future. Now, for the first time in a long while, I actually enjoyed where I was. Even if it scared me. Near the end of the day, we finished hanging the last lantern. Parker stepped back. "I think that's it." I looked up. The pavilion looked beautiful. "You've got a good eye." He smiled. "I had help. I'm pretty sure I just handed you things." "You handed me the right things." I rolled my eyes. "Nice save." "I'm serious." He looked around one final time. "You notice details." Nobody had ever said that about me before. "Really?" "I've watched you work. You catch little problems before anyone else." He shrugged. "That's rare." For one brief moment, neither of us looked away. The noise from the rest of the crew faded into the background. Then, "There you are!" Mia walked toward us carrying a clipboard. "I've been looking everywhere." She looked from Parker to me, then smiled far too knowingly. "There are witnesses." Parker blinked. "Witnesses to what?" "I don't know yet." She grinned. "But I'll figure it out." Parker laughed, shaking his head. "I think she's impossible. I've been saying that for weeks." "You still like me," Mia called while walking away. "We tolerate you," Parker shouted back. "I'll take it." Her laughter echoed across the orchard. I laughed too. Parker glanced at me. "What?" "You've got one of those laughs." "What kind?" "The real one." I frowned. "There's more than one?" "Oh, definitely." He smiled. "The fake polite one. The tired one. The embarrassed one. And," he looked at me for just a second, "the one you do when you forget anyone's watching." I opened my mouth. Closed it again. Because he was right. And I hadn't even realized he'd been paying that much attention. The next few days should have gone back to normal. Instead, everything felt different. Not because Parker had changed. Because I had. Once someone starts paying attention to you, it's impossible not to notice the little things in return. The way he greeted every employee by name. The way he always thanked people after they finished a job, no matter how small. The way he never asked anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. I understood why everyone respected him. It wasn't because he was a Bennett. It was because he'd earned it. Thursday morning started with wedding preparations. The ceremony was scheduled for Saturday evening. Flowers arrived. Tables arrived. A delivery truck somehow got stuck near the loading dock. Everyone was busy. I was carrying boxes into the reception barn when Parker caught up beside me. Morning. Morning. You free after lunch? I think so. My mom wants help setting up centerpieces. I smiled. You trust me with flowers? I trust you not to break expensive things. I appreciate the confidence. He laughed. It took time. I've been here almost a month. Exactly. You've earned flower privileges. Lunch was quieter than usual. Tyler had the day off. Ron was working with another crew. Even Mia seemed distracted. You okay? I asked. She sighed dramatically. My little brother just informed me he's taller than I am. Is he? Barely. So technically he's right. I don't like you today. You never like me. I tolerate you. I pointed toward Parker. That's his line. I stole it. Parker looked up from his sandwich. I'm being quoted now. Congratulations. He sighed. I've become predictable. Only slightly. He looked at me. Careful. Why? Spend enough time around Mia and sarcasm becomes contagious. Too late, Mia said. He's already funny. I was funny before. She looked unconvinced. Were you? Parker laughed into his coffee. Watching him laugh had become dangerous. Because every time he did, I caught myself smiling too. After lunch, he led me toward one of the older buildings behind the market. The Bennett family home sat farther up the hill, partially hidden behind tall maple trees. It was beautiful without being flashy. Large front porch, white siding, gardens everywhere. It's nice. Parker followed my gaze. My grandmother planted most of those flowers. They're incredible. My mom's kept them going. He opened the back door of a smaller event building. Inside, long tables overflowed with decorations. Candles, glass jars, ribbons, fresh flowers. A woman arranging centerpieces looked up and smiled. There you are. She walked over immediately. So this is Scott. I smiled. You've heard about me too. Parker closed his eyes dramatically. Oh no. His mother laughed. I'm Claire. It's nice to finally meet you. She hugged her son quickly before turning back to me. Thank you for putting up with him. Parker looked offended. Mom. What? You're making me sound difficult. You were stubborn before you could walk. I learned from Dad. She smiled innocently. I married your father. I know exactly how stubborn he is. I couldn't help laughing. Parker sighed. I'm outnumbered. You usually are, Claire replied. Within 5 minutes, she'd somehow pulled me into arranging flowers beside her. So, she said while trimming stems. Scott. Yes? How's everyone treating you? Really well. I'm glad. She glanced toward Parker. He worries. I do not. You absolutely do. She smiled at me. He always worries about new employees. I just want people to enjoy working here. Claire reached over and lightly patted his arm. I know. Something about the exchange felt warm, comfortable. The kind of family dynamic that made you smile without realizing it. An hour passed surprisingly fast. Claire told stories about previous weddings. Parker kept pretending to be embarrassed. Most of the stories involved him accidentally breaking things as a teenager. I was 12. You drove the golf cart into a flower bed. I was avoiding a goose. The goose wasn't moving. It looked aggressive. I laughed so hard I almost dropped a vase. It absolutely was aggressive. Claire pointed at me. See? Someone understands. Parker shook his head. I've lost control of this conversation. Eventually, Claire stepped into another room to answer a phone call, leaving Parker and me alone again. He carefully adjusted one of the centerpieces. My family likes you. I looked over. I like them. They'll be happy to hear that. They're easy to like. He smiled. They'd say the same thing about you. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question I'd been wondering for weeks. Can I ask something? Sure. Why did you remember me? He frowned slightly. What do you mean? Before I started working here. You knew who I was. He looked genuinely surprised. Scott. He laughed softly. Of course I did. But why? You've worked at Harris Hardware forever. Lots of people work there. Yeah. He looked at me for a moment. But not everyone spends 20 minutes helping customers figure out the right tool when they could have just pointed at a shelf. I blinked. You noticed that? I notice people who are kind. The room suddenly felt very quiet. He continued arranging flowers like he hadn't just completely rearranged my heartbeat. I figured, he said. Anyone who treats strangers like that is probably worth knowing. I honestly couldn't think of a response. Because I'd spent years believing he'd never seen me. Meanwhile, he'd apparently been paying attention all along. The wedding itself arrived on Saturday. Employees wore nicer clothes. The orchard looked incredible. Music drifted across the property. Guests filled every chair. Our job mostly involved quietly solving problems before anyone noticed them. Someone needed extra chairs. Someone spilled lemonade. A microphone stopped working. Parker somehow handled everything without looking stressed. Near sunset, the ceremony finally began. Employees stayed respectfully out of sight. I stood near one of the barns watching from a distance. It's nice. I turned. Parker had appeared beside me. It is. The bride walked slowly down the aisle. Everyone stood. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Parker quietly said, My grandparents got married right over there. He pointed toward an old oak tree farther down the hill. Really? Long before this became an event venue. They planted most of the first apple trees together. I smiled. That's kind of amazing. He nodded. They used to tell me every tree meant planting for someone you'd never meet. What does that mean? You plant an orchard knowing most of it won't reach full maturity for years. He looked toward the rows of trees. Sometimes decades. So you're building something. I finished quietly. For people who come after you. He looked at me. Exactly. The ceremony ended with applause. The guests cheered. Music started. People laughed. But for some reason, I kept thinking about those words. Building something for people you'd never meet. It sounded exactly like the way Dad talked about the hardware store. The reception lasted well into the evening. By the time the last guest left, everyone was exhausted. We stacked chairs beneath strings of glowing lights. The orchard was quiet again. Only employees remained. David clapped Parker lightly on the shoulder. Good job today. Thanks. Claire hugged both of them before heading toward the house. Mason waved goodnight from his truck. One by one, everyone left. Until only Parker and I remained near the pavilion. He looked up at the lanterns we'd hung together days earlier. They still look good. I guess we didn't do too badly. No. He smiled. We make a pretty good team. The words slipped out naturally. Without hesitation. Without realizing what they did to me. A team. I looked at him. He was still watching the lanterns. Completely unaware that my heart had decided to sprint. After a long silence, he looked back. You know. Yeah? I'm really glad you took this job. I smiled before I could stop myself. I'm glad I did too. He held my gaze for another second. Long enough that something unspoken settled quietly between us. Neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. Then, somewhere behind us, the old clock above the market struck 10. The sound broke the moment. Parker exhaled softly. I should lock up. Yeah. I should head home. He nodded. Drive safe, Scott. You too, Parker. As I walked toward my truck, I caught myself smiling. Not because I'd fallen for him. That had happened years ago. I was smiling because, for the first time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, He was beginning to look forward to seeing me as much as I looked forward to seeing him. After the wedding, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not enough that anyone else would have noticed. But Parker and I stopped feeling like coworkers who occasionally talked. We started looking for each other. It happened in tiny ways. If I arrived first in the morning, I'd catch myself glancing toward the parking lot. If Parker finished a job before I did, somehow he'd end up walking in my direction. Neither of us ever mentioned it. We didn't have to. Monday morning began with rain. Not a storm. Just one of those slow summer drizzles that covered the orchard in a soft gray mist. Most outdoor work was postponed. Instead, everyone moved inside the maintenance buildings. Mia looked out the window dramatically. I vote we all go home. Ron didn't even look up from sorting tools. Denied. I wasn't asking you. You weren't asking anyone. She sighed. My dreams keep getting crushed. Parker walked in carrying a clipboard. Good news. Mia brightened immediately. We're going home? No. She deflated. We're reorganizing storage. I liked my version better. You always like your version better. I really do. Everyone laughed. Even Ron. The maintenance barn quickly turned into organized chaos. Shelves emptied. Boxes moved. Old equipment sorted into piles. I was halfway through organizing spare irrigation parts when Parker stopped beside me. You've got a system. I like things organized. I noticed. He glanced toward the shelves I'd already finished. I should have put you in charge sooner. I think that's dangerous. Why? I might start labeling everything. His eyes lit up. You can label things? I stared at him. You're serious. I love labels. I laughed. That's the most responsible sentence anyone's ever said. I know. He picked up a marker. Need help? For the next hour we labeled bins together. Not exactly exciting. Yet somehow. It was one of the nicest mornings we'd spent together. Conversation flowed naturally. Favorite childhood cartoons. The worst cafeteria food we'd ever eaten. Whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It absolutely did. It absolutely didn't, according to Parker. You have terrible taste. I have standards. You have fear. I have dignity. I don't think that's the same thing. It is if pizza is involved. Mia walked past carrying a box. You two arguing about food again? Pineapple. She nodded once. Scott's right. Parker looked betrayed. I expected more from you. You expected incorrectly. She kept walking. I feel attacked, Parker called after her. You'll survive. Around lunchtime the rain finally stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds. Everything outside smelled like wet grass and fresh earth. Parker looked toward the open barn doors. Come on. I frowned. Where? I want to show you something. We walked deeper into the orchard than I'd ever been before. Past the public areas. Past the event fields. Past rows of apple trees that seemed to stretch forever. Eventually we reached a small hill overlooking almost the entire property. The view stole my breath. You've been hiding this? He smiled. Most people don't come out this far. I looked across the valley. The morning rain still shimmered on the leaves. Everything looked impossibly green. It's beautiful. I thought you'd like it. You come here often? When I need to think. He shoved his hands into his pockets. My grandfather used to bring me here. What for? He said. Parker smiled to himself. If you can't remember why you're working so hard. He looked across the orchard. Come somewhere quiet until you do. We stood there in comfortable silence. Then I noticed something. You brought your camera. He looked down. The camera hung from a strap at his side. I usually do. You still take pictures during work? When I get a minute. He hesitated. Actually. He looked at me. Would you mind? What? If I took one? I blinked. Of me? He nodded. You don't have to. It's just. He looked almost embarrassed. The light's really good. Nobody had ever asked to photograph me before. I don't know. You can say no. I looked out across the orchard. Then back at him. Okay. He smiled. A real one. Thanks. He lifted the camera. Immediately. Something changed. Not him. The way he looked at the world. His expression became calmer. Focused. Gentler somehow. Just. He lowered the camera slightly. Don't pose. What am I supposed to do? What you were already doing. So. I looked back across the trees. Nothing? Exactly. The shutter clicked once. Twice. 3 times. Then he lowered the camera. That's it. Already? I don't like making people uncomfortable. Were they okay? He checked the screen. His smile grew a little. Yeah. You want to see? I stepped closer. The photos surprised me. I didn't look awkward. Or uncomfortable. I looked peaceful. Like someone simply standing in a place he liked. That's. I searched for the right word. Really good. You make it easy. I looked at him. What? He quickly shook his head. I mean. He laughed awkwardly. Good lighting. I wasn't convinced. Neither was he. When we returned to the main buildings, Mia immediately noticed the camera. Oh! She pointed dramatically. Photography day? Parker sighed. I took exactly 3 pictures. Of what? The orchard. She looked at me. Then at Parker. Then back at me. I see. You absolutely do not, Parker replied. She smiled suspiciously. I know nothing. You know too much. I usually do. That afternoon everyone worked in different areas. I ended up repairing benches near the farm market. Visitors wandered through buying apples and homemade pies. Around 3 o'clock an elderly couple stopped beside my workbench. Excuse me. I looked up. Yes? The older woman smiled warmly. Could you take our picture? Of course. She handed me her phone. The couple stood beneath one of the oldest apple trees. Before I took the picture, the man quietly reached for her hand. She smiled at him. Not dramatically. Like it was something they'd done for decades. I took several photos. There you go. The woman looked at them. Oh. She smiled. These are lovely. Thank you. As they walked away, I heard her quietly say, We should come back next year. So long as we're able. We will. Their fingers stayed linked as they disappeared between the trees. Something about that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it looked so simple. Comfortable. The kind of happiness that didn't need to prove anything. Near closing time I found Parker sitting alone on the back steps of the market building. Camera beside him. 2 cups of coffee. He held one out without saying a word. You keep doing this. You keep accepting. That's true. I sat beside him. For a while we watched the sun begin to set over the orchard. You ever think about leaving? I asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. Sometimes. And? I usually come back to the same conclusion. Which is? He looked out across the fields. My favorite people are here. The answer sounded simple. But something in the way he said it made my heart beat just a little faster. What about you? I looked down at my coffee. I used to think I needed to leave. And now? I smiled faintly. I'm not as sure anymore. He nodded slowly. Funny how people change. Yeah. They do. A breeze moved softly through the trees. The silence between us felt easy. Comfortable. Like either of us needed to fill it. Then Parker spoke again. So? My mom invited everyone over next Sunday. I looked at him. The whole crew? End of summer barbecue. Families too. Oh. My heartbeat stumbled. My dad would probably like that. I was hoping you'd bring him. There it was again. That quiet sincerity. No hesitation. Just honest warmth. I think he'd like that too. Parker smiled. I was hoping you'd say yes. Before I could answer, the old bell above the farm market rang, signaling closing time. He stood, picking up both empty coffee cups. We should lock up. Yeah. As we walked back toward the buildings, I couldn't stop thinking about next Sunday. Because for the first time, I wasn't just being invited to a work event. I was being invited into Parker's world. And somehow, that felt like the beginning of something neither of us had found the courage to name yet. Sunday arrived faster than I expected. Dad spent 20 minutes pretending he didn't care what he wore. I'll just grab whatever's clean. 5 minutes later, he was standing in front of the closet with 3 different shirts. You've changed 3 times. I have not. You absolutely have. He looked at me. I haven't been invited to someone's house in a while. I smiled. I know. He quietly buttoned the blue shirt. Think this one's okay? It looks good. He nodded once. Good. For some reason, seeing him excited made me realize how long it had been since he'd done anything that wasn't work. Maybe this day mattered for more than one reason. The Bennett house looked even warmer than I remembered. Cars already lined the driveway. Employees laughed on the back lawn while someone grilled burgers. Kids chased each other across the grass. Music played quietly from the porch. It didn't feel like a company event. It felt like a family gathering. The moment Parker spotted us, he walked over. You made it. He smiled at Dad first. Mr. Harris. Please. Dad shook his hand. It's Jim. Only if you call me Parker. Deal. They laughed like old friends. Then Parker looked at me. I'm glad you're here. 3 simple words. But they stayed with me the entire afternoon. Claire insisted Dad take home enough food to feed the neighborhood. David immediately disappeared into a conversation with him about suppliers, equipment, and the future of small family businesses. Watching them together made something inside me relax. Dad wasn't worrying. He was laughing. I honestly couldn't remember the last time I'd seen that. Meanwhile, Mason challenged Tyler to a cornhole tournament. Mia somehow convinced 3 children she was the official scorekeeper despite nobody asking her to be. The entire afternoon felt effortless. Like everyone belonged. Including me. Late in the afternoon, I wandered toward the edge of the orchard. Mostly to escape the noise for a few minutes. Footsteps followed. I figured you'd end up here. I turned. Parker. Holding 2 bottles of water. You know me too well. I'm starting to. We walked slowly between the apple trees. No destination. Just walking. For a while either of us spoke. Finally Parker broke the silence. My parents like you. I like them. My dad especially. I laughed. I noticed. He doesn't compliment people very often. I've heard. He means everything he says. I looked at him. So do you. He smiled quietly. I try to. We stopped beneath the same old tree where I'd taken that elderly couple's photograph a few days earlier. Sunlight filtered through the branches. Everything felt strangely still. I've been thinking. His voice sounded different. More careful. About what? You. My heart immediately forgot how to behave. I know. He laughed nervously. Not exactly subtle. I waited. When you started working here. He looked down for a second. I thought it would just be another summer. Then we kept talking. He smiled to himself. And somehow. He shook his head. I started looking forward to mornings. I couldn't breathe. Because I'd get to see you. The words settled gently between us. Honest. Simple. No dramatic speeches. Just the truth. I kept telling myself. He continued. That I was imagining things. What things? The way you smiled whenever we talked. The way you always remembered little details. The way it somehow became easier to laugh. He looked directly at me. I wasn't imagining it, was I? For years, I'd imagined this conversation. 1,000 different versions. Every single one disappeared, leaving only the truth. No. My voice barely rose above a whisper. You weren't. He didn't move. Neither did I. I've liked you. I smiled helplessly. For a long time. How long? I laughed softly. You really want to know? I do. Before I worked here. His eyebrows lifted. Seriously? You used to come into the hardware store. Recognition slowly spread across his face. The extra 10 minutes. I nodded. You always helped me. I was working. You always talked to me a little longer than everyone else. I blinked. I thought I was imagining that. He smiled. I usually invented reasons to ask another question. For a full second, neither of us said anything. Then we both started laughing. I cannot believe this. Parker covered his face. You've been telling me you secretly like me. After I spent years trying to find excuses to visit the hardware store. I stared at him. What? I definitely didn't need that many screws. I laughed so hard I had to lean against the tree. You are kidding. I'm absolutely not. I thought you barely noticed me. I thought you were just being nice. I was being nice. So was I. Another silence. This one lighter. Full of relief. So, Parker said carefully, what do we do now? I smiled. I think. I reached over and took his hand. Simple. Natural. We stop pretending. His fingers closed gently around mine. I'd like that. So would I. We stood there beneath the apple tree. No audience. No dramatic moment. Just two people who had spent far too long believing the other one couldn't possibly feel the same way. After a few quiet seconds, Parker looked toward the house. We should probably go back. Probably. My family is going to notice. They already have. He laughed. Mia definitely has. She's going to be unbearable. The worst. But she'll also be incredibly happy. He was probably right. As we walked back, we didn't let go of each other's hands. Nobody made a scene. Claire simply smiled. David looked at Parker, then at me, and quietly nodded like he'd been expecting this all along. Mason grinned so widely it was almost suspicious. I won $20. Parker frowned. What? I told Mia you two would figure it out before summer ended. You were betting on us? It was a very small bet. Mia raised her hand proudly. I lost. She looked at both of us. Worth every dollar. Everyone laughed. Even Parker. Even me. Dad walked over a few moments later. He looked from our joined hands to my face. Then he smiled. A quiet, proud smile I'd never forget. I'm happy for you. That was all he said. He didn't need to say anything else. Summer eventually came to an end. I stayed at Bennett Orchards. Not just for the season. For good. Dad kept the hardware store open. With help. David introduced him to suppliers he'd never met. The business slowly recovered. Not overnight. But enough. I returned to college part-time. Finished the degree I'd left behind. Parker finally entered one of his wildlife photographs into a regional competition. He won. Claire cried. David claimed he already knew it would happen. Mason insisted he'd predicted it years earlier. Nobody believed him. Life didn't become perfect. It simply became honest. And sometimes, that was even better. Years later, whenever visitors asked Parker how we met, he'd smile and say, he came to work for my family. Then he'd glance at me. And somehow, he ended up becoming part of it. Every time he said it, I'd smile the same way I had that first day he remembered the hardware store. Because the funniest part of our story wasn't that I got a job working for my crush's family. It was discovering I'd never been the only one secretly paying attention.